Thank you all for coming out tonight for the Meet the Candidates Board of Education Forum. We want to thank our gracious host, the Carroll Arts Center, for hosting this event tonight. My name is Rodney Morris. I am the president of the Carroll County branch of the NAACP. I, along with members of the NAACP and the Carroll County Kids for Equity, organized tonight's forum. Both organizations are nonpartisan. Our goal is for this event to be able to have the candidates tell us about why they are running, and a chance for us to hear their responses and make the best informed decision we can at the upcoming election for what we feel is best for our schools. The questions for tonight have been submitted to us by those registered, and we have consolidated similar questions and are hoping to get to as many as possible. Mr. Charles Harrison from Carroll County Chapter NAACP and Ms. Samaya Rahman from Carroll County Kids for Equity will be our moderators for this event. Please be advised that this event is live streaming and being recorded. Therefore, please note microphones can pick up all conversations. Please let us listen and learn what the candidates have to say. Before we begin, please check to ensure that your phones and every other devices are silenced. I will now turn the event over to our first moderator, Mr. Charles Harrison.
Okay, thank you, Rodney. Good evening and welcome again. Thank you all for participating in this forum for this evening. I want to be able to thank the candidates for coming out to share your knowledge with the citizens of Carroll County, and we certainly appreciate that, so thank you. Special thanks go out to the Carroll Arts Theater for their cooperation and participation and allowing us to utilize this facility. Again, thank you to the Community Media Center, which will be broadcasting this event. Bear in mind that this event and this forum is not endorsed or sponsored or co-sponsored by the Carroll County school system, okay? Maryland's primary elections will begin and take place on July 19th with early voting that starts on July 7th and will run through July 14th. For the Board of Education races, voters at that time can opt to select 3 potential candidates or folks who will sit on the Board of Education. For this event, all 8 candidates were contacted, agreed to participate, and agreed to cooperate and appear at this panel. 6 of those 8 will go forward to the general election. At that time, vying for only 3 of those seats. So with that in mind, we need to listen very carefully to the responses that you all will provide to the citizens of Carroll County. Tonight's forum will be premiering on channels 19 and high definition channel 1086 starting tonight at 9 p.m. and also will run on May 23rd and May 24th. It is also being live streamed tonight on YouTube and at Carroll Media Center website at carrollmediacenter.org. Okay, as moderator, I will introduce each candidate in alphabetical order by name. Each candidate will have 3 minutes to provide us with an opening statement. All responses will be timed, and the candidates will be asked to stop after that 3-minute time period has lapsed. Okay? Each candidate will have, after that we will get into the question and answer period. Each candidate will have 1 minute to respond to each question. We will get to as many questions as possible during this evening so that we might keep this candidates forum within that 2-hour time period, but we will adjust as time goes on. We will get as many questions as possible. There will be no debate. There will be no responses to questions, okay? This is an informational forum, okay? So we can proceed accordingly, okay? All candidates will answer questions in order so that everyone will get an opportunity to respond first, okay, to each question. The questions posed tonight by the candidates were prepared by the Carroll County NAACP, the Carroll County Kids for Equity, and in addition, some of the questions submitted to us in advance came from the community, and you, the participating audience, received cards. It will give you an opportunity to pose questions that we will present this evening to the candidates, okay? At the conclusion of the question and answer period and before the end of the forum, each candidate will have an opportunity to present a 2-minute summary to the audience. So again, I cannot stress this enough. Please, no applause, no responses from the audience that is going to detract any one of us from hearing what these answers that are provided by the candidates. Okay, so please, with that, let us begin. We will now begin with the first question and answer period. We will begin with Dr. Dorsey, Dr. Patricia Dorsey, okay? Let us start with something more straightforward, Dr. Dorsey. What is the most important thing to know about student learning and how to promote it, in your opinion?
Is this a part of my opening statement that you want that? Or?
Oh, I'm sorry. I got ahead of the game. All right. No, let's go ahead and you make your opening comments, and then we'll come back to that question.
So now I know what it is.
Well, I might change it. But no, feel free, Dr. Dorsey. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Patricia Dorsey, and it certainly is my privilege to participate in this Board of Education Candidates Forum. Many thanks to the Carroll County Kids for Equity and the Carroll County chapter of NAACP for sponsoring today's event. Thanks also to the Carroll Media Center for recording this forum and making it available to all of our Carroll County citizens. Thanks to our moderators, to the timekeeper, and to Carroll Arts Center for providing the venue. And certainly I thank the audience for attending today's forum. And I also thank my fellow candidates for your interest in our school system and the students we serve. Building on my experiences as a former Carroll County student, teacher, parent, assistant principal, and my preparedness of having studied education policy, planning, and administration, I have gained additional experience by being a member of the current Board of Education and a member of the Board of Directors for the Maryland Association of Boards of Education, known as MABE. I am active on several committees that have an impact on local board governance throughout the state. Namely, I am on the Equity Committee and the Conference Program Committee. I will continue to use all of my knowledge and skills to work on behalf of our students, staff, parents, and communities of Carroll County. And as you know, we've just recently appointed a new superintendent, so additionally, I will help with the transitioning of our new superintendent, Mrs. McCabe. There certainly have been many issues that our current board has dealt with over the past 4 years. I have attempted to be a voice of reason while dealing with the issues. Who would have imagined the emergence of the worldwide pandemic, and it certainly has had an impact on all of our lives. Our students faced learning loss because of the disruption of face-to-face learning, and the pandemic also intensified mental health issues. Our staff faced added pressure by the lingering effects of the pandemic and having to pivot to and from remote instruction. And we know that our parents, too, have been challenged by new and different ways to support their children academically and emotionally. I remain grateful to everyone who turned the challenges into opportunities. Moving forward, my top priorities are to ensure all students are provided multiple pathways and opportunities for success, to retain and recruit quality teachers and staff, to enhance a diverse workforce, to ensure that our staff's salaries are competitive, and to support implementation of the blueprint for Maryland's future. So I look forward to discussing these issues and any other ones today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dorsey. We certainly appreciate those opening remarks. Okay, next up, Dr. Amanda Jakowski.
Thank you. Good afternoon, youth of Carroll County. I want to thank you for the opportunity to meet with you in this public venue. On the way here, I was actually listening to DC 101, and the song The Freshman came on, which was popular when I was in school. And it really made me reflect on, how darn hard it is to be in middle school and high school, and what it's like to be a student. And I can't even imagine having to do it in the context of a pandemic and global warfare and environmental crisis and all of these things that you're having to deal with today. I've spent a lot of time listening to and talking with many of you individually over the last year, and you've shared many concerns and ideas for continuing to improve CCPS. I'm grateful and impressed by your candor, organization, bravery, and tenacity. I hear you when you say you just want to feel free to go to school as yourself, free from worry about bullying, and in a space that supports your learning and your well-being. I hear you say that safety, online, from fights and sexual harassment, from drugs and gun violence, is important to you and should be a major concern of the schools. I hear that you want to learn and explore new ideas, and that you worry about differentiating the many messages you are bombarded with from facts and the reality of the world outside your small towns. I hear your fears that those who are charged with your care and who make decisions and elect leaders on your behalf seem to be more concerned with pushing political agendas than they are about your mental health, your bodily autonomy, the environment, global injustice, access to health care and resources for all, and other issues that will have long-term impacts on your lives and livelihoods. I look forward to hearing your questions tonight, and I hope you'll continue to be involved and informed about this and other races that will, in part, decide the quality and direction of your education and your future possibilities. Thank you again for having me and for your efforts to be a part of this important process.
Thank you, Dr. Jakowski, for those comments. Next up, Mr. Pat Sands.
It is our true life experiences which shape our lives and make us who we are. Going to school can be a trying experience, that is to be sure. However, in addition to that, I'd like to tell you a little bit more about myself. We have 4 children, 17 foster children. I've lived in Carroll County for about 40 years. When in my youth, I drove a 3-point D-stock hydroplane between ages 16 and 21. Graduated from Benjamin Franklin University with a degree in business finance. Excuse me, I'm an accountant. A volunteer for the U.S. Navy, served 4+ years. I am a Vietnam veteran. I was at the 1968 pop-up Christmas show at Freedom Hill, Da Nang. I was an auditor for a finance company. I'm FBI retired after 27 years. I still have my appointment letter with J. Edgar Hoover's original signature on it. One Christmas at the Columbia Shopping Center, my partner and I recovered a toddler. We found and returned the boy to his mother. I've been in every state in the Union except Hawaii. I've been to, excuse me, Canada, Mexico, lived in Japan for 2 years, been to Formosa, now known as Taiwan, Philippine Islands, Vietnam, Puerto Rico, Haiti, Cozumel Island, and Jamaica. I purchased a vehicle and traveled the country in Japan. While in Japan, I taught myself enough of the language to survive on the economy. Taught myself katakana, hiragana, and about 30 pictographs kanji. Now I recall very little of the language. I was able to go where others could not since I knew enough to live on the economy. I've been inside the Buddha at Kamarakura, the one with all the apples and stuff on the guy's holding. While in various countries, I learned some of the customs culture, mannerisms, excuse me, which significantly helped me in my chosen profession. I am a certificated flight instructor since 1978, Civil Air Patrol Chief Check Pilot for about 4 years, Treasurer, Secretary for a local club for 9 years, while being able, what I bring to the table is a lifetime of true life world experience, which I can use to help these students in the school system. Why am I candidate for the school board? It is my belief all parents should have a say in the education of their children with little interference from any government. It is my belief those who have direct access toward our youth must not corrupt our youth with information not in keeping with traditional family values. The youth of today need to be well educated in the basics in order to make a suitable life for themselves. They need to learn what they need to know in order to make their way in this world. It is my belief anyone who attends a school board meeting must be heard regardless of the issue. Did I time out? Yeah, sorry. That's okay.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Sands. We certainly appreciate that. Next up, Tom Scanlon. Mr. Scanlon, please.
Hi, thanks for coming, everybody. My name is Tom Scanlon. I'm a retired teacher with 33 years of experience here in Carroll County. I started out as an English teacher at North Carroll High School. I earned my master's degree in reading from McDaniel College, and I am also ESOL certified. Early on, I began to advocate for having reading specialists in the high schools because of the many students with reading deficiencies. I'm very proud of having helped bring that needed position to our schools. Helping struggling readers became my passion as a teacher. Over the years, I had several student teachers, served on several curriculum writing teams. At North Carroll, I also co-advised the drama club, and I supervised our literary magazine. In 2016, I transferred to Westminster High School until I retired at the end of the 2020 school year. Besides being a teacher in the county, I have also lived here for over 30 years. My wife and I have had 4 sons go through Carroll County Public Schools, so I am also a parent, and I thoroughly understand the parent perspective. Over the years, I've seen a lot of changes in our schools and some challenging times, especially these past 2 years. I decided to run for the Board of Education because I know we can recover with the right leadership. The blueprint for Maryland's future is going to bring huge changes to education in Maryland. We will have a new superintendent very soon, and we will have at least 4 new county commissioners in November. We need an experienced, steady hand in the coming years. And I think that's what I bring to the table. I've been in the system, and I know how it works. My top 3 priorities. Number 1 is to focus on our students in the classroom to fill learning gaps and get back on the track of on-grade level instruction. Number 2, we need to attract and retain a highly qualified staff through competitive salaries and a supportive work environment. And number 3, we need to bring our schools back as community centers where families can come together to celebrate their schools and their neighborhoods. So my time as a parent and as an educator gives me the unique perspective our school system needs to move forward. And I truly believe in excellence and opportunity for all. It's you, Mr. Harrison.
I'm still here. Thank you, Mr. Scanlon. Next up, Ms. Katie Skirt. Okay.
Good afternoon. I want to sincerely thank the Carroll County Kids for Equity and the NAACP for hosting today's event and providing this opportunity for the community. I also want to thank the Community Media Center and the Carroll Arts Center for making all of this possible as well. I've been a resident of Carroll County my entire life. I grew up attending Mechanicsville Elementary School, West Middle School, and then graduated from Westminster High School in 2014. What I love the most about Carroll County is the diverse opportunities we have here. I love driving home from where I work in Westminster to my home in Union Bridge. Every day I drive past farms, manufacturing plants, schools, restaurants, technology, real estate and insurance companies, hair salons, parks and playgrounds, and more. What makes Carroll County so great, all of those opportunities that we have here, have been dampened by political agendas that take us further away from inclusion and acceptance, agendas that drive us further from community. As amazing as this community is, we need leaders, not politicians, to drive our schools forward. We need to leverage all of the amazing resources in our community to ensure our students and staff have access to the tools they need to reach their highest potential. My platform focuses on 3 main things: whole child education, community partnership, and teacher recruitment and retention. As a parent, a community member, a nonprofit leader, and a product of Carroll County Public Schools, I am dedicated to bringing education back to our community and community back to education. What's unique about me is that I bring innovative ideas and solutions to some of our most pressing challenges. Through my nonprofit work, leading and founding Together We Own It, my service to a number of Carroll County committees, boards, and work groups, including the Carroll County Local Management Board, the Local Care Team, the Winners Mill Community Partnership, the Opioid Prevention Coalition, and the Governor's Office Trauma-Informed Commission, and my education with a bachelor's in psychology, a master's in school business administration, and as a doctorate of education student studying community care and counseling, I understand what Carroll needs. I lead by example, reaching out to our largest stakeholders, the students, and ensuring that their voice is heard too. I am proud to witness the work of the Carroll County Kids for Equity as one example of the kind of leaders our school system has a role in developing. With the support and guidance of our Board of Education, I know that our students will continue to thrive as accepting, courageous, and educated citizens of our community. I look forward to today's discussion, and I am hopeful for a chance to serve you on the Carroll County Board of Education. Thank you.
Thank you to all of the candidates for their opening statements. Now we will move on to the prepared questions. Remember, candidates have only 1 minute for their answer. Let's begin with the first question, this time starting with Dr. Dorsey. So let's start with something straightforward. What is the most important thing to know about student learning and how to promote it?
I think one of the most important things to know about student learning is that student learning really is a journey. I mean, we just can't set one pathway and expect for all students to be successful with that one pathway. We certainly have to meet the needs of students where they are. And it's something that historically Carroll County has been working on for years, even from the time when I was in the classroom. We always had to check to see where the students were so that we could know what instruction to prescribe to them. So they all may not have gotten to to a certain spot at the same time, but we had faith and belief in knowing that as we gave them what they needed, they would eventually achieve the goals that we had set for them. So it's about differentiating instruction and giving everyone what they need to learn.
We will now be moving on to Dr. Jazowski.
Thank you. I agree that to be effective, learning must be individualized. Students need to be able to demonstrate their learning in different ways. But I also think that it's important to keep in mind that learning is not just about academics. It includes real-world skills. A lot of those executive functions that help us to learn more effectively and that I work on with children in my practice as an occupational therapist. So this includes social-emotional learning, problem-solving, critical thinking, ethics, creative and flexible thinking to understand the complex problems of today. All of that is so critical to actually taking in information, evaluating it, and using it effectively to apply to the real world.
We will now be moving on to Mr. Sands.
I believe that students need to be motivated, need to have the guidance and the responsibility that to learn. You can't make a person learn anything if they don't want to learn it. I've been witness to that many times. It is important that everybody have an opportunity to learn whatever it is they need to know. It is my responsibility in my own family to see that my children had that guidance and that responsibility to learn. Thank you. That's it.
We will now be moving on to Mr. Scanlon.
Knowing each student is very important because, as was said earlier, each student has their own way of learning, and so you do have to assess each student to understand where they are. I think perhaps even more important or just as important is developing a relationship with the student. If a student feels comfortable in your classroom, they're going to do better. They are relaxed. They're going to push in more to learning if they feel that level of comfort. And so knowing that student on more than just academics is very, very important as well.
And last but not least, Ms. Spear.
We have diverse learners in Carroll County, and just as it's been said, we need to ensure that our instruction models that diversity, is inclusive and accepting. Access to equitable solutions is really critical to promote our students' learning, and to be able to showcase what they can do by elevating their voice, highlighting their differences is really important. So I think that as a school system, we need to take time to hear from our students, to listen to them, to build relationships with them, and then be able to provide solutions that meet their individual needs. And we can do this by promoting their voice within the Board of Education, with our student representative, within clubs like Carroll Kids for Equity, and with other groups and organizations within our school system.
Okay. Times have changed. Our environment varies from day to day. What's required of us as adults changes according to the times. So starting with question number 2, and we'll start with Dr. Jakowski. Okay, what skills do students need to possess to be successful and in their future endeavors and career path? What do you, as a member of the school board, plan to add to improve them on that career path?
And all in 1 minute. Thank you. So actually, I think my answer to this is very similar to my previous one when I talked about what's most important for learning. I think that students need to have maybe not what we would traditionally think of as a well-rounded education, but well-rounded in the sense that it includes not just traditional academic subjects, but also those real-world skills that I keep talking about, that critical thinking, the citizenship, ethics, knowledge of communities and diversity. I think all of that is so important because if you don't understand how the world works and the complexities of it, if you don't have a philosophical base that you're pulling from, then understanding why you're learning math or how what you're learning in social studies relates to our history and then the decisions that will be made down the line, it's meaningless. And so I think that it's really important to incorporate all of those different types of skills together.
Thank you. Mr. Sands?
The students should be exposed to real-world tradesmen, people who are working in the workaday world, see what they do and how they do it and what they need to know in order to perform their jobs. They need to be able to reason well, make sound choices based on knowledge and beliefs, have a good religious background, and just be ethical in their performance. Always tell the truth. The truth will always set you free. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sands. Mr. Scanlon?
Well, as a reading specialist, I might be a little biased, but I think that reading is the gateway to just about every other subject matter in school. So that is incredibly important, getting reading skills, starting the very beginning and keeping children on grade level as much as humanly possible as they go through school. That's number one. And the other thing, especially nowadays, is communication skills. So many people have difficulty in communicating with each other. And we hear that in workplace discussions of bosses and stuff, is they say that their employees don't know how to communicate with each other. And so to be able to partner and work in teams, that is also incredibly important. Those are the two things I think we need to work on.
Thank you. Ms. Spirit?
Sure. Fostering the social, emotional, and cognitive development of our students is crucial. In order to develop citizens of Carroll County that can demonstrate empathy and accountability and be informed to make decisions and to enter into the workforce in our community, we need to ensure that they're well-rounded. So recognizing that not all students are college-bound as well. So being able to provide them with experiences that give them opportunities to practice real-world skills like communicating with a boss or being able to connect with people that might have different opinions than themselves. Our students need to be able to face controversy and adapt, be open to new ideas. I've heard a lot of argument against social emotional learning, that they learn that at home. But if that's true, then they would grow up in an echo chamber. So our schools have an opportunity to demonstrate to our students new ideas, new perspectives. They need to be able to handle that.
Thank you. Again, let me caution and remind one, let us silence our cell phones so that we can focus on what we need to hear. We're coming full circle. Dr. Dorsey.
We still need basic skills. It's the reading, the writing, the math that we still need to instruct our students on. Additionally, we need to make sure that we're building in some critical thinking skills, divergent thinking skills. We need to foster a joy of learning. And we also need to teach our students to work as team members. They need to know how to collaborate and work with others. So I think that those are the main skills that we need to continue to foster in our students.
We will start our third question with Mr. Sands. When addressing disciplinary behavior, should schools offer instruction in negotiation and other forms of peaceful problem solving?
I probably shouldn't say this, but in 1959, 60, or someplace in there, when I was in senior high school, some young man did a bad thing. And he was immediately, if not sooner, kicked out of the school, kicked out of the Maryland public school system. I'm not saying that was harsh, I'm not saying it was fair, I really don't know the circumstances. But in my day, when a student misbehaved, he was disciplined for it, he was kicked out for a day or two, maybe a week or 3 weeks or something like that. I don't know if that's really fair or not, but today has changed. And I would say we need to be a little bit more reasonable in our conduct and look at the circumstances in total before we make a command decision as to the student's future.
Mr. Scanlon?
Yeah, I agree with whatever that question was about, because we do need to have our students learning how to speak to each other, learn to listen to each other. They need to be able to understand why the motivation of different people. So a restorative justice model for discipline in a high school or any school would be excellent. We also need to understand that our building administrators work very hard with the school counselors to try to deal with issues as they arise. And there's a lot of things that happen with the discipline in particular that we never hear about because of confidentiality laws. So things do happen, but working with the school counselors and the PPWs can also be very, very helpful.
Mrs. Spear?
In short, yes. I wish I had hours to speak on this topic, but zero tolerance policies that work to suspend and expel our students only perpetuates an issue. Without addressing the feelings that lead to the problem behavior in the first place, our students don't learn from their mistakes. They don't learn from each other. They don't learn how to face each other and work together. I think that if I could share forever, last week we led a restorative circle with a group of youth, and we heard from our students that mediation is what they want. In a lot of ways, being able to communicate with their peers before they're sent home for 3 days is what they want to really overcome those differences. So students need people and policies that are clear and consistent and that hold them accountable. And it sounds like that's what our students want too.
We will now be moving to Dr. Dorsey.
Yes, we do need to instruct our students in negotiation and problem-solving skills. We need to teach them how to solve their conflicts peacefully. And one of the things, I know counselors have been mentioned, but as students are involved in disciplinary infractions, A lot of times if we give them some think time so they can work through maybe a problem-solving sheet, what were my actions, what could I have done differently, who did my actions affect? If we can go through some problem-solving and conflict resolution with them, it's very much helpful. And I think the counselor is a key person to help work them through such conflict resolution. And as well, we need to make sure that all of the adults surrounding the children are really teaching and modeling the same mediation and problem-solving skills.
Lastly, Dr. Jazowski.
Thank you. I think it's really important to look for patterns, both among those that are doing the bullying and those who are targets, because that way we can see, maybe get a sense of why this is happening and how we can provide more intensive support if needed. I personally was trained as a peer mediator in high school, and I really value that type of training, and also have a student affairs background at the university. So I absolutely think that negotiation and problem solving and relationship-based models are really the way to go. I also think that responses really have to be individualized to the parties that are involved. And so in some cases, that type of a communication strategy is not going to be effective, and folks need to know when to step away or maybe when to change directions. And so I think having high expectations and also accountability, as Ms. Speart was talking about, I think is probably the most effective way to go.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, next question will be for Mr. Tom Scanlon. As a member of the school board, how would you address the concerns and deal with the concerns of students, staff, and parents?
That's a big question. I think the first thing, of course, is to listen to what the students, staff, and have to say about things. Everybody has an opinion, and everybody has the right to express their opinions. And the job is to take all of that and balance it and come out with policies that best suit our students and our school system. So being open to listening is the number one way to deal with that. And then once you're able to listen and discuss, come up with policies that work.
Thank you. Ms. Spirit.
Not in an effort to repeat what Tom just said, but I think it's really important that we give our students, our parents, and our staff members a voice. And I think creating clear and structured platforms for them to communicate with us as a Board of Education is important. I also think ensuring that the time that we give them to utilize their voice is made to matter. So it's not just comments that we don't then reflect on and that we don't circle back to. I think that that's important to acknowledge that we're listening. I think it's important for us as Board of Education members to remind ourselves that we serve our community, and our parents, our students, and our staff members are our community, such a large piece of that. If elected, I'm not here to drive my own personal agenda, but to reflect from my experiences and my relationships in the community and elevate those voices of those constituents.
Thank you. Dr. Dorsey.
I agree that, again, we address those concerns by listening. And it sounds very pat and very simple. And certainly, there are times when it gets to be quite challenging. But again, we have to listen. And just because someone is coming from the viewpoint that maybe we don't agree with, we still need to listen to get a better understanding, if we can, of where they're coming from. I know as an administrator and even as a teacher, I would listen to my parents, and I always felt that the parents, even if they disagreed with me, I felt like they had their child's best interest at heart, so we would try to certainly make compromises when we could. So we do need to listen, and we need to make sure we're listening to all voices, not just the loudest voices.
Okay. Dr. Jakowski.
Thank you. I spoke at the last forum about the fact that there is evidence that when parents and teachers work together, the outcomes for students are better. So we know this to be true. The parent voice is absolutely important and something that we should be listened to. I agree also that I think that we need better and more organized platforms or methods of communicating concerns and comments and to then make sure that there is actual follow-through. But I would also encourage those who seek to be a part of the process to do more than simply participate on social media or even showing up at board meetings. You know, reading the same books their children are reading, volunteering in the schools, getting to know the teachers and administrators. All of that, I think, takes it a step further than simply saying what you think, and it means taking action for the good of the schools and the students.
Thank you. Your response, Mr. Sands.
Interview all those involved, get the facts before making a decision. Find out what the truth is, to present it to those people who will make the command decision as to what action to take. Jumping to conclusions usually proves, well, useless, and it's harmful to people, but facts always speak for themselves. Thank you.
Okay, based on the last question, we will be moving on to Mrs. Spear, and you'll be answering, expanding upon the last question, should students be involved as a part of the decision-making process? And should the student representative have the right to vote on the Board of Education?
Absolutely. I think that our students, I know that our students are our largest stakeholders in our school system. They're the reason why we do this. I think that our students, if we don't provide opportunities for our students to be empowered, to use their voice, to give them true experiences and true power behind their voice, they'll never use it. And so I think that it's really important as a Board of Education that works to develop systems for our students, that we put them in the driver's seat. I think that we need to listen to our students. As I mentioned earlier, I hosted a forum last week with students, and they all turned to me and said, "Why are you asking us these questions?" And I said, "Because this is about you." There's a lot of people talking about what you want, what you need, and I want to know from you. So I think our students need to feel that their voice matters, and I think a way that we can start with that is to allow the student representative on our Board of Education to have voting power.
Next, Dr. Dorsey.
I agree that certainly students should be involved. And again, we can involve them in a number of ways. I mean, they certainly can serve on different committees. They can really be a voice that maybe links with those administrators and persons on their staffs to have an ear to. Because again, it is the students, so we need to be certainly listening to what their concerns and what their lived reality is like in the classroom. As far as the student rep having a vote, it would be great if the student rep had a vote. Again, this would have to be something that would go through legislation, so we would certainly have to be in touch with the state delegates to see if we could have that passed for Carroll County. I know we have a few counties in the state of Maryland where there is the vote for the student rep. So again, it would be done through legislation.
Next, Dr. Jazowski.
Yes, thank you. I've been pretty vocal about this topic already. I've written a piece for the paper and posted frequently on social media about it. And full disclosure, I served as a student representative as a high schooler. And that was a hugely formative experience. I was involved in the selection of the state superintendent, and having that empowerment and being made to feel like I had a voice, I think was super important. I also think that if we say that our school system is as strong as it is, then we should think that our students are qualified to be a part of the decision-making process, right? Students that are actively volunteering, taking the time to participate at that level, I would certainly want to give them a vote, and I would advocate for that as well, although I know that there are channels that would need to be gone through to get to that point. Several of our neighboring counties have done so, and it is definitely something that I would be pushing for.
Mr. Sands.
Students need to know that their voice counts. They need to be part of the decision-making process. However, I don't know if I agree with being a voting member. They need to be able to see how it works in the real world, where people who have true life experiences have made decisions all their life and how they've affected others. Students, yes, they need to be empowered. They need to be able to think for themselves. They need to have these tools available to them. and be able to make reasonable decisions based on reasonable information and true life experiences. Thank you.
Mr. Scanlon?
Well, our job as educators is to engage and empower our students. So I would say giving them a seat at the table on the Board of Education is very, very important. And I believe Devanshi Mistri's tenure on the board shows us that students are up to the task. Students are major stakeholders, and the student rep is elected by the students. 6 counties gives students a vote. None of them get full voting rights. So I like Howard County as a model, might be a good compromise. They don't get to vote on the budget, they don't vote on personnel or collective bargaining, but they get to vote on every other part of the conversation. So I would certainly support voting rights for the student rep, and I would like to see Carroll County as the 7th county to give the rep a vote.
All right, thank you. We're back around to Dr. Dorsey. Dr. Dorsey, our school system has had several allegations of discrimination against marginalized groups. How would you, as a member of the board, address those issues?
We certainly need to get to the bottom of allegations. And again, when we talk about allegations, we have to be concerned that when we're dealing with students, we just can't put all of the information out there. There are certain privacy rights that we do have to follow. While we're following those privacy rights, we do need to make sure that we're being opened with the community and others so that they'll know that a situation is being resolved, it's being handled. Even though we can't go into the specifics of any of the cases, we need to come up with some statements to let the community and the staffs and even the students who are involved, we need to make sure that everyone knows that a situation has been dealt with, it has been handled, because when we say that we have a non-discrimination policy, we certainly need to make sure that we're following it.
Thank you. Dr. Jaworski.
Yes, I agree that it's important to have transparency throughout the process and good communication. But I also think that we need to make sure that we're not just engaging in performative allyship. So would-be politicians will sometimes come in and say, we accept everyone, we want everyone to feel welcome and safe. But we need leadership and actual actions toward that end. So we need to show support and acceptance and inclusion for everyone, and that are in the best interests of our community. I think that saying that some should be protected from discomfort, and therefore a symbol of welcome and acceptance shouldn't be allowed, means that you have decided who's worthy of feeling safe and comfortable. And I think that that's inherently racist and homophobic, and I think that we need to do better.
Thank you. Mr. Sands.
This is the United States. Everybody here, according to the Constitution, is equal. Discrimination is not right, it's wrong, even on its face. To allow marginalization of people in a school or any system is definitely wrong. And I vehemently disagree with that practice. It needs to be corrected and stopped in its tracks. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sands, Mr. Scanlon.
There we go. Dr. Dorsey mentioned the confidentiality, and that is real. And I think that we do absolutely, though, need to be as transparent as possible legally when investigating whatever kind of allegation has been made against anybody. The Board of Education has to set the tone of being inclusive. We can't have a Board of Ed that says that they're agreeing with all students, but then not following through. So we definitely need to set that tone. And finally, we do internally, there does need to be a system of accountability developed if it's not already there.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Spirit.
we need to listen and listen without judgment. As a Board of Education, we need to acknowledge that perception is reality. And so if individuals are coming to us with concerns, we need to take those at face value. Setting aside our own personal feelings, bias, or any kind of agenda, as a Board of Education, we need to lead by example. I think the division that's started within our community and has continued, we need to get at the root of what that looks like. And recognize that that division starts at the top, and as a Board of Education, we need to model what kind of relationships and what kind of community we want to demonstrate for our students and our community members. So I agree that transparency is key, having clear policies in place ahead of time, so that way when it comes down to addressing the allegations, we can do so in a way that is clear and consistent. We need to be empathetic to our community members, and we need to ensure that we are addressing everyone's concerns.
Prior to moving on to our last prepared question, I just wanted to allow the audience to know that students from Kids for Equity will be coming around to collect any question cards for participant section. So please allow Kids for Equity to your questions if you have any. So on the last question, we will be asking Dr. Juzowski first. With staff retention rates on the decline, what, if any, actions should be taken to support them? In addition, what, if any, actions should be taken to also prioritize the mental health of students?
I didn't get the first few words of that. Would you repeat the question, please?
Yes. So with staff retention rates on the decline, what, if any, actions should be taken to support staff? In addition, what, if any, actions should be taken to also prioritize the mental health of students?
Yeah, so this is a huge problem, right? And I think that we need to be creative. I think that, of course, I would support increasing salaries and related benefits for all educators, and that includes all of the support professionals, reducing class sizes to the extent possible, decreasing out-of-classwork tasks or out-of-classroom tasks so that they are less overloaded. But as I've said many times before, it also comes down to just showing educators that we care, that we trust them, that we respect them, that they are the professionals that they were trained to be, and changing the culture so that they want to come be a part of our great system. And that also means making the system excellent for students as well, to be included and accepted and feeling a sense of belonging. Because when we create that culture as a part of our system, teachers will flock to us. And we may not be able to give them the salary that we would want to, but we can do as much as we absolutely can, and we should.
Thank you. Mr. Sands, you're up.
Find out the reason for the decline by asking the people who are leaving why they are terminating their employment voluntarily, and address the issues that they bring up. I believe Carroll County allegedly pays the lowest wages for teachers in the surrounding area, which is true. I've researched it. If it's a money issue, we need to think about that and address that. If it's other issues, find out what they are, like poor work environment, harassment by management, et cetera. And I can't think of anything else that would be needed. Right.
Mr. Scanlon?
Well, of course, salaries do come at the top of the list as far as teacher retention, but also the teaching climate is also very, very important. A lot of teachers feel that they are not listened to, that they don't get the respect they deserve. People say, oh, we have the great teachers, but, that's kind of the bottom line. We have great teachers, but. Contract negotiations is another thing that we don't hear too much about, but they are contentious every go-round, and they don't need to be, because if CCPS and the bargaining units worked collaboratively, they would come up with basically the same contract without going through mediation, which actually costs the county money to go through mediation. You also asked about student mental health, correct? And that's very important because school counselors, we do pretty well on the high school level, but not on the elementary levels.
Thank you. Mrs. Spear?
I think in the context of the question, I think we can lump together staff retention and mental health with our students. And when we think about staff retention and students' mental health, I think we need to direct ourselves inside the school building. We need to understand what goes on inside those four walls. Many of us as Board of Education, as parents, as community members, we don't often always understand what happens within the building. And so giving our students and our teachers a voice to express their concerns and to share with us why they're leaving and why their mental health is a challenge within our school settings, I think is important. So I know the Maryland Blueprint advocates for some different reform that's going to provide more support for teachers. As a Board of Education member, I would fully support the Maryland Blueprint and work to provide funding for that. But I think it starts with culture, and I think it, again, starts from the top down. And as a Board of Education, we need to model for our community, for our students, and for our staff, inclusivity and acceptance so that we can increase the mental health of our community members.
Thank you. Last but not least, Dr. Dorsey?
The action to be shown in both instances really revolves around respect. We certainly have to respect our teachers, our professional staff. We need to treat them as professionals. That means we're not going to micromanage what's happening in the classroom. We're setting the policy. The superintendent and his or her staff are setting the administrative regulations, and then we're trusting the teachers and educational staff to do their part and do the teaching. So again, it's the respect, it's treating them as professionals, and they need to feel supported by the Board of Ed. They should never walk away and question how their Board of Ed feels about them. As far as students are concerned, we're a public school system. We need to accept all students. We need to accept each student, and we need to, again, show each student respect.
Okay, thank you. That concludes our question and answer portion of the evening. We will now move on to audience participation questions. Always my favorite part. We will start this with Mr. Sands. Given the recently proposed flag policy, how can you use your position to ensure that LGBTQ and students feel safe in Carroll County public schools?
Are you talking about putting up a flag or what? What is the question?
No, I will read the question again.
All right.
Given the recently proposed flag policy, how could you use your position to ensure that LGBTQ and students feel safe in Carroll County public schools? It does not mention a flag. Policy in general.
Excuse me. Wow, that's people behave the way they behave. I can't answer to man's conduct or a woman's conduct. A person's stripe should not matter in any other circumstance. People are who they are, and they need to be accepted for that. Using my position would be to dissuade that kind of conduct, adverse conduct, to any group or of people.
Okay. I think the key here is the portion of the question that feels safe in Carroll County public schools. It does not focus specifically on those other issues. How would you use your position to make students feel safe? Thank you. Mr. Scanlon.
Okay, so the personal connection between a student and a teacher is extremely important. And when you walk into a teacher's classroom, there are posters on the walls, there's decorations, and there might even be a flag or two besides the American flag. And having like a rainbow flag, pride flag, just indicates to a student that they're in a friendly space. It's not political. There's no politics in that. It's not an open invitation to have counseling sessions. There is no teacher that I am aware of that would want to have counseling sessions with their students. So the flag policy that's being proposed, I think, does harm to our school system because it's implying that some students are okay and other students are not okay. That's my take on it. And the other thing I want to say very quickly is that I talk to teachers all over the place and administrators, and nobody that I talked to complained about the flags. And the elementary kids, they thought they were nice to have them in their classrooms.
Mrs. Spear, do you want to answer the question?
Sure. I think with my position right now, I think that I am working to focus my energy on ensuring that our students understand that I wholeheartedly disagree with the flag policy. I think that what I can do right now is to advocate for that. If elected to the Board of Education and the flag policy is what it is, aside from working to overturn the policy, I think that creating safety in our schools should be done anyway. I think we have an issue in our schools where individuals feel not included, don't feel accepted. I think that that's why we are here where we are with this policy. So I think working to instill social emotional learning in our schools is a great way to allow our students to build relationships beyond their academics and be in an environment where they have the emotional intelligence to be able to connect with each other so that our LGBTQ students and other students feel that they can be who they are within our school setting.
Thank you. Dr. Dorsey?
In order for all students to feel like they're ready for learning, they have to feel safe. They have to feel accepted. So it's our job as the adults to make them feel that way. We have to make sure that we're setting up a welcoming environment for each student. I frankly have to share that I've just been hurt as I've talked with students to see the pain that they have felt in the proposed policy. Even before I retired from the school system, there were teachers who had the flag, the rainbow flag, in their classrooms. And everybody was okay with that at that point. You know, the kids were comfortable, and for those that it gave that extra layer of, safety net to, it was good for them. It was good for them to have that. So now, hearing that is something that's considering being taken away, again, it's very hurtful because each student needs to feel safe.
Dr. Jazowski?
I want to first thank you for your advocacy on that issue as a current board member, Dr. Dorsey. I think, I've already spoken tonight about taking actions rather than just saying things. And I also think that, having a symbol of celebration for certain groups and a symbol of safety and security and belonging is important, and that if we don't allow this, that it is saying that we have decided that certain groups deserve more than others to feel safe and comfortable in their learning environment. I would use my position and my power and my platform to speak up and lift the burden for others, educate them on these issues, advocate for or against policy changes as a Board of Education member.
Thank you. Next, we will move on to Mr. Scanlon. Talk to us about your priorities for early childhood intervention and increased access to early childhood education.
Since my experience has mostly been on the secondary level, I would not ever claim to be an expert on that. I know that that is extremely important, especially for low income, to have access to the early childhood education, the preschool, which will be coming with the blueprint for Maryland's future. And I also know that especially in the primary grades, we need to focus on reading grade level. I mentioned that earlier. And then the other skills, the social, emotional skills. For the young children, we do know that there's been a lot of emotional issues based on being home for a couple years and being behind. So students need to have that space where they can feel comfortable, but also understand what it's like to be in a school setting and to be interacting with peers, class of 25, so that's very, very important as well.
Mrs. Spear?
I believe as a school system, we have the opportunity in Carroll County to partner with community agencies. And we have a number of community agencies in Carroll that support the work of early childhood. We have a number of birth to 5 programs. We have a Head Start. We have the Judy Centers through Carroll County Public Schools. We have so many resources that I think we need to do a better job at promoting those and empowering our parents to be educators at home before our students are educated in our school system. So I think by connecting parents with those resources through those community agencies, through the school system's early childhood programs, and just with different events to bring parents in, bring students in to get them accustomed to the school system is important. I also, in March, spent 2 weeks in Finland and Sweden, and biggest takeaway I can bring home is that play is so important. Their school systems are rated the top in the world because play is such a critical component of their education system, not just in early childhood, but throughout all of their education.
Thank you. Dr. Dorsey?
You know, there have been times that we've even talked about pre-birth, some things that we can actually share with parents to help them be prepared for their children even before they're born. Just ways that they can motivate them and work with them, how to set up their nurseries, how to read with them and talk with them. So we, again, would encourage that we continue to provide that service for parents even before their children are born. And as the blueprint is going to be unfolded, again, our school system is going to have to increase our pre-K full-day access. And again, we are working with some partners in the community to make sure that pre-K programs are more readily available for children.
Dr. Jazowski?
Yes, I'm very excited about the expanding access to the pre-K programs through the Maryland Blueprint. I think that this also provides a much clearer pathway for accessing supportive services for children who need accommodations because it gets them in the system earlier. And as several people have said, it orients families to what services are available and how parents can partner with the school system. I also agree with Ms. Spirit. As an occupational therapist, my training, of course, is in play-based intervention. And so children at that age, they learn through play, they learn through doing and imitation. And the most important components of learning at that age are social skills, motor and communication skills, reading and reading to children, being safe and being fed so that they can learn and grow and be themselves.
Mr. Sands?
As for me, my wife read aloud to our children prior to their birth. After they were born, she kept reading to them. Before they went to first grade, they could read rudimentarily, but they could read, they could write cursive, or I guess it's called today. My day it was called script. This is vitally important that a child be exposed to these things in the early years, and it aids in their development and in their educational development. All 4 of my children are highly successful today, and I credit most of that with the early learning imposed upon them by my wife. So I am all for it.
Okay, thank you. Next question will be for Mrs. Spirit. Based upon your experiences, what are the greatest lessons learned from the pandemic regarding education in Carroll County schools? How should we use those lessons to support schools' progress and improvements?
So my experience during the pandemic, as it relates to Carroll County Public Schools, was in leading the nonprofit Together We Own It. And during the time, we moved from serving students in person through after-school programming to partnering with Carroll County Public Schools to offer a in-person virtual learning environment for some of our most marginalized and vulnerable students. And through those experiences, we served nearly 75 students from 28 different schools, K through 12, and it was a learning curve for all of us. I think as a school system, we learned that we don't know what goes on in the lives of our students when they're at home. And that it's important that we create a school environment where our students feel safe and accepted, where our students have access to technology and other resources, assuming that all of our students go home and have the same kind of support is a loss for our school system. And so I think moving forwards, I think we need to learn from what the pandemic brought us and move forwards more accepting and more inclusive of our students with different needs.
Thank you. Dr. Dorsey.
One of the learnings I think that I've had concerning the pandemic is that, again, when it started, we were thinking maybe a few weeks and maybe things would return to normal, and certainly that wasn't the case. So during that time, we sort of laxed the accountability a little bit for students. And it sort of put students in the mode where maybe they didn't try as hard initially with some of their work. So one of the things that I would sort of do differently would be to build in the accountability, try to keep that going strong as best as we could, or as best as we could do it, and then to also build in some structures for socialization, because as kids were at home working on their own, maybe with a sibling or two, they were missing all of that socialization that school provides for them. So I would try to build in some structures where they could meet, even if it's online, meet with a group of students.
Okay. Dr. Tchaikovsky.
I think the first thing that most people learned is the value of teachers and educators. What a difficult and important job it is, right? And how challenging it is to do day to day, even with just one child sitting in your living room next to you, let alone 25. I think we also learned a lot about the possibilities with technology for expanding access and how that can be used in the future to connect various parts of the county, various programs, and maybe some specialty areas that not everyone has access to currently. I think we also learned a lot about the importance of social interaction and its relationship to mental health, and how critical it is that we maintain that interaction to the extent possible. And finally, I think we learned a lot about the process of science. A lot of people didn't realize that as we gain new knowledge, recommendations and guidelines might change, and it's important to understand that and be able to consume information and use it effectively, but also know that things aren't set in stone and that we need to be flexible.
Thank you. Mr. Sands?
We learned, among other things, that students need the interaction of other people in their age group. They need to keep those social skills. They need to be able to communicate well and effectively. They need these things vital for their learning and for their growth, both mental and physical. It is difficult to imagine a society with a complete lockdown like we had. It boggles my mind that that happened. However, it did happen. I don't know all the answers. I don't know any of the answers, really. But I do know that it needs to be addressed, and changes need to be made by people who know what they're doing.
Thank you. Mr. Scanlon?
Well, we do know that the virtual school was not successful for everyone. There were some that they thrived on that, but for many they did not. And part of it was having the access to technology. The school system, I think, did as much as they could to provide that access, but it's just not available for everyone. Another thing we learned is that the importance of parental support. Without the parents being involved, whether it's in person or virtual, students do not do as well. So that parental support is extremely important. And we did learn that being in person is the best way to go. Somebody mentioned the socialization between peers, but also that interaction between a teacher and a student is vital. Moving ahead, we do need to keep that in mind. Obviously, flexibility is important. We don't know what the future holds, but being aware of support needed.
Thank you so much for your response. Next up, we have Dr. Dorsey. What do you plan on doing to combat misinformation and negative stereotypes in Carroll County?
I'm a proponent of trying to get as much information, as much training as we can possibly get. Serving on the Equity Committee for our Maryland Association of Boards of Education, I just really understand that we need to make sure that we are providing equal access to all of the resources, all of the rigorous instruction that we have available to each of our students. We need to make sure that we're tailoring instruction to them. To combat misinformation, we need to talk. We need to sit down and have some conversations. When I use the word equity, as a board member, everybody else on the board should understand what I mean by the word equity. When I use the word inclusion, everyone should know what inclusion means. So we need to talk and talk and get some education, some training, so that we're sharing correct information.
Thank you for your answer, Dr. Jazowski.
I think in relation to racism specifically, I think that if young children can differentiate between skin colors and use racial slurs, they can also learn about racism and other difficult and sensitive topics. No one certainly wants a child to suffer any sort of, from exposure to the upsetting truths about our past and our present, but I think that keeping discussions about race and other topics like this out of the classroom doesn't protect children from racial conflict. And I think that teachers who are trained to lead sensitive and thoughtful discussions about complex issues should be some of the best people to discuss this. Children are impressionable, they're full of potential and eagerness to learn. They're not inherently hateful. And I think that if we teach them the role that race and other topics have played in shaping our society and how to work for a more just and equitable future, we can teach them not to repeat the shames of our past and move forward for a better future.
Thank you. Mr. Sands?
In order to defeat misinformation and disinformation, you need to find out the source and the source's motivation for doing this. It is imperative in my mind to correct these statements of misinformation, disinformation with facts. People will respond to the facts very well. Children are not born as people who hate. They must be taught to hate. And that must be stopped and corrected. But unfortunately, it won't be in the near future. It has to start in the household, where much of this goes on, and in the schools as well, with among other students, like bullying and such as that. That needs to be corrected and stopped, if it ever can be. I certainly hope it can someday. Thank you.
Next, Mr. Scanlon.
I heard someone recently say that we have a pandemic of disinformation, and a lot of that comes through social media. But I think as a school system, we need to put that behind us and look as our schools become more diverse, we need to recognize that, and rather than try to ignore it, we need to celebrate that diversity is an avenue for all of us to come together as one community. And having a highly qualified and diverse staff will help, because our teachers are the role models for our students. So I think we need to start there as well. And we're never going to eliminate racism and intolerance by simply talking about it. We have to lead by example. And so we must create a school culture of acceptance, kindness, compassion, and that's how we move forward.
Lastly, Mrs. Spear.
First, as far as correcting misinformation, it's our role as a school system to educate, and I think we need to take a stand in educating our community to correct misinformation through social media and other platforms, so that our community acknowledges that as a Board of Education, we are seeking the facts. We are seeking to shed light on what's truly happening inside our school system or based on the controversy that's happening. I think as a Board of Education, with the negative stereotypes as well, I think as a Board of Education, we need to stand up against discrimination and hate. As I mentioned before, it starts at the top. I think that if we reflect on Carroll County Public Schools' beliefs, values, and our core statement, I think we would acknowledge that as a school system, we've set the precedent that hate and discrimination have no place here. But in action, we haven't seen that to be true. And so as a Board of Education, we need to model that behavior for our students and for our community.
Okay, thank you. Moving right along, next question will be for Dr. Jackowski. What are your thoughts on teaching critical race theory?
Well, I have yet to hear an example other than the privilege survey that some have cited as evidence of CRT in the schools. Coincidentally, this is the same example that's being used at school board meetings across the country. One activity in one classroom at one school is not evidence of a pervasive issue, and I disagree that this activity is actually CRT, just because it asks students to reflect on the construct of privilege. That said, I've shared previously that I have experience participating in that particular exercise, and I find it to be problematic for several reasons, including forcing students to share private, personal, or family information, and because it forces a binary without the possibility of explanation or clarification. Many students may be exposed to harm, and therefore I don't support it, and in my professional roles at the university, I have advocated against its use. However, until I hear a candidate or board member who is against CRT or who asserts that racism in our schools isn't a problem, actually define CRT correctly, and provide evidence of its widespread influence, I remain unconcerned, and I think that this topic is both a distraction and attempt to silence marginalized groups who wish only to be offered the same opportunity to pursue a quality education as all other students.
Thank you. Mr. Sands.
CRT, critical race theory. Critical means right now. Race, there's 7 major races in the world. Why is the United States the only one that has this problem? Theory is defined as something said to be true, but for which there is no proof. So why are we teaching kids in school something that's a bogus information? Why are they being exposed to this stuff? I'm vehemently opposed to CRT. It is wrong. It is wrong. No matter how you slice the cake, it's still wrong. Thank you.
Thank you.
And you don't want to get me started on that because I will speak for years.
Well, you've got a few more minutes if you care to address it.
Well, okay. Nani? I mean what?
20 seconds.
Excuse me. Nani means what in Japanese? What am I going to say? Shoot, I forgot. Oh, yeah. CRT to me is teaching lies. It's fabrication. It's a pansy thing. It's something that shouldn't even be considered in the schools. We're teaching our kids to be, well, dumbed down.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. All right, Mr. Scanlon.
Well, in my 33 years in the school system, I have never seen a lesson that even closely resembles CRT. I taught English, so we read a lot of literature that dealt with sensitive topics, but there was no CRT there. I worked in U.S. history classes, and I worked in U.S. government classes. And once again, never saw anything that even closely resembles CRT. So I do not believe it is being taught in our school system. I think it is a distraction for people to be bringing it up. The reality in the classroom is there is so much content to get across in 180 days that there is no time to add extra things like lessons on critical race theory or any of that. I mean, look at the U.S. history textbooks. They're pretty straightforward, pretty factual.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Spirit.
I can echo much of what was said. As a Carroll County Public School alumni, I did not personally experience CRT in my schooling. I don't believe that it is a system-wide issue. If it is an issue for individual students or teachers or families, then I think it needs to be addressed independently. To answer the question, I don't believe CRT has a place in our school system. As Tom mentioned, we have bigger fish to fry. I think it's a manufactured problem that has taken up way too much time for our community and for our Board of Education when we have declining mental health, declining teacher retention. I think we have such bigger issues to address that CRT has become a distraction.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Dorsey.
CRT certainly does not belong in Carroll County Public Schools, and it is not in Carroll County Public Schools. As far as I understand, it's dealing with discrimination within the legal system. So certainly teachings concerning CRT are not a part of CCPS. When we start talking about culturally responsive curriculum and having different minorities, different groups reflected in the curriculum, that's not CRT. So I think some of the conversations that we have, I think some people are confusing some of the more culturally responsive things that we're trying to put in place with CRT. But again, CRT doesn't belong in CCPS, but we do need to make sure that we have a culturally responsive curriculum.
Thank you so much for your answer. Now we will be moving on to Mr. Sands. What current or past experiences or aspects of your identity makes you more empathetic to hearing concerns from staff and students?
Okay. Well, I was an FBI agent for 27 years. That was my job, to go out and get facts, to listen to people, to write it up, to make it factual reporting. Going to trial, you have to present the facts. I worked personnel problems for about 10 years, and it is amazing what people will tell you if you only listen to them. The key here is listening. Most people put their values onto the speaker. When you talk to somebody, you can't put your values onto somebody else. You have to listen to what they say from their side of the fence, not from yours. If you listen, did I time out yet? Okay, thank you. If you put your values onto somebody else, you'll miss the point. So from my point of view, facts count. You need to listen and go with what people say happened or did not happen. You need to present the information as they see it, not how you see it.
Thank you so much for your answer. Now we'll be moving on to Mr. Scanlon.
Well, I would say, just for me, the 33 years I've spent in a classroom in different schools, I have worked with all grade, not all grade levels, in a high school, all grade levels and all academic levels, and students from all backgrounds. And after a while, you realize that these are just, they're people. Everybody has, their own outlook on life. They have their own family situations. And you just learn how to listen to these kids, and you learn how to work with them regardless of, we talk about, race, religion, ethnic background, socioeconomic status is a huge one that we seem to overlook a lot. And so, working with these kids for years, you develop an empathy, I guess. I guess that's the best way to put it. You develop an empathy.
Well said.
Mrs. Spear?
In 2015, when I was 19, I founded a nonprofit called Together We Own It to serve one child. And it was because she had a lack of access to resources, her and her family. And through this and through leading this grassroots organization over the last almost 7 years, I have put all of my eggs in the basket of empowering individuals at creating opportunities for folks to achieve their highest potential. Through this boots on the ground work, I've met many families in our community. We've served over 3,000 children and families in Carroll County, and through that, I've acknowledged that we're all very different. But we all are after, when it comes to our school system, one thing, and that's to provide resources and equitable solutions for our students. So through this work, I find that I've developed strong empathy for our students and staff. I can put myself in their position, and I also find that I have developed the tools to elevate their voice.
Dr. Dorsey?
Well, being a member of the minority group or the non-majority group, I think it gives me an empathetic listening ear, and it's one that I can really relate to, but being a member of a minority group. And I can even go as far back, and I know this sort of ages me at this point, but again, I was a student here in Carroll County when we had to attend segregated schools. So I know what segregation looks like. I know what it looked like on the first day of school at Robert Moton High School when I was given a textbook. On the inside cover, there was a label with Westminster High School stamped, and all of the lines were filled in with students who had gotten that book at Westminster High School. Well, this was my book now, beginning a new year at Robert Moton. So that's the way segregation sort of looked for us, just a snippet of what it looked like. And I'd like to share more, but I will stop. I wanted to talk about the integration as well, but anyway, I'll stop for there.
Thank you so much for your response. Now we'll be moving on to Dr. Duzowski.
In my training as an occupational therapist, but also as a resident advisor in college, an academic advisor, currently as a professor, and as a mom, I have deep empathy and appreciation for diverse perspectives and for helping everyone get what they need to succeed. As an OT, we have training in what's called therapeutic use of self, where we listen and develop a shared understanding with the folks that we're serving. And I think that through showing, through my actions, my commitment to community and to justice and equity, that is how I can demonstrate that I'm really in it for the right reasons and that I will do what is needed to serve others.
Okay, thank you. This is for Mr. Scanlon. Understanding that as a school board member, you don't have hands-on day-to-day contact with students. Understanding that, how would you deal with victims of, or what recommendations could you make in dealing with recommendations for victims of bullying so that they feel heard?
Well, bullying has been a perennial issue since, all of us were in school. And I think what's very important is that we need to have a multi-tiered approach to solving the problem, starting from the top on down. And on the school level, we need peer-to-peer interventions and what's it called? I just forgot the name of it. There's different programs in school that are important, and on a whole school level, restorative justice programs. But it is up to the school to make that culture of kindness and compassion that will help with bullying, and also understanding why students don't report, because a lot of bullying does not go reported, and it's not because they feel afraid or intimidated, it's because they're embarrassed. They're ashamed. Why am I the target? And so we need to deal with that as well. Thank you.
Mrs. Spirit.
As I mentioned before, the zero tolerance policies really don't have a place in our school system. They don't work to solve the problem. And I think through those policies, we've created an environment of labeling victims as victims, labeling bullies as bullies. And we've never really gotten to the root at why bullies bully and why victims feel that they're targeted. I think through, I'm trained as a restorative conference facilitator, and through the work of restorative conferencing, I think that we can create an environment in our schools where students have the ability to speak for themselves, to address their concerns and their challenges within the school system. And individuals have the opportunity to identify and express the feelings that have led them to the behaviors that they've expressed. So I think as a school system, we need to address this, as Tom said, as a multi-tiered approach. But I think restorative conferencing is a great way, just one example, of how we can get to the root of these problems rather than putting labels on our children.
Thank you. Dr. Dorsey.
Well, we have procedures in place. If a student feels bullied, again, they really do need to report that. And as an administrator, if a student shares that they're being bullied, there are bullying forms that need to be completed, and you need to work through the process that's in place to handle bullying. Sometimes I think where there might be a breakdown, sometimes students feel like they've reported and still nothing has been done. So I would encourage all students, one of my biggest recommendations would be to keep telling your story. If you're being bullied and you don't see it being resolved at all, be persistent, keep telling it. And just like we have levels of who to report to in different areas, well, it should be the same at the school level. Report it to your teacher if you feel that nothing is being done. Again, and if it's true bullying, it would be at the administrative level anyway. But we just need to be persistent and keep telling it until you feel like you're really being heard.
Thank you. Dr. Sikorsky.
I do interact day-to-day with students in my role as a professor, and the issues at the university are similar to what we see in CCPS. I think that if students feel safe and their opinions and ideas are valued in the classroom, but also that they can try on new perspectives, and feel supported in doing that, this can expand their ways of thinking and decreases the likelihood of conflict. I think that if we work on effective communication skills and we also have clear expectations and processes for handling negative behaviors, this will go a long way toward limiting these problems in the schools.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Sands?
Students need to know actions have consequences. You buy the ticket, you take the ride. You do something wrong, you're out of school for a day or two or a week. They need to know, the other students need to know this too. Actions do have consequences. You're not only teach them how to behave in the school, you're carrying it through to the rest of their life. Now, I estimate there's certain people in here who have not been bullied, and most of us have, myself included. And I didn't like it, but that's the way life is. If you let these people go, the perpetrators go, they're gonna do it again and again and again. So it needs to be stopped. You buy the ticket, you take the ride. You do the crime, you do the time. I'm sorry.
Thank you so much. Mrs. Spear, this question's for you. What is the role of a board member to create an inclusive school environment? And what is your plan for schools recruiting more diverse staff so that our children see themselves represented in the faces of their teachers?
Thank you. I see the role of the Board of Education is to set the example, and I think we need to lead by example. I think to answer the first part of that question and the second part, creating a culture of inclusivity starts at the top, and I think as Carroll County, we've gotten away from that tremendously. I think it's been reflected in our current Board of Education, and it has to stop. As far as teacher recruitment, our students need to walk into the school and feel that they are reflected in their educators, in their curriculum content. Our students, Dr. Dorsey referenced culturally responsive teaching, and I think that we need to ensure that that is evident in Carroll County Public Schools. So one way, it's hard to say all this in a minute, but one way that we can bring that into our school system is by taking a look at our curriculum and ensuring that our curriculum reflects our community so that we can attract teachers to want to engage in our community and with our students by being able to teach what is reflective of the culture here in Carroll County.
Dr. Dorsey?
Again, we can certainly go back to earlier comments about making sure that, we're showing respect to everyone. And as far as creating an inclusive environment, we need to make sure that we are building in those goals and working hard to meet them. We should have a goal so that in every school, the staff diversity would be reflective of the student diversity. Students need to see themselves reflected in their staff members. I know every year we have annual reports on recruiting and what the recruiting efforts have been like for the year, but we need to continue to highlight that we do need to continue to work on this staff diversity. And again, we need to be doing things so that, people would want to come here to Carroll County. So again, I think we need to start just with everything, making sure that we are showing respect for diversity and inclusivity so that people would want to come, and we need to keep our goals stated as well.
Dr. Juzowski?
The blueprint guidelines do map out how we can increase diversity in hiring, which I think is critically important. But as many have said, I think that we must demonstrate a welcoming and accepting environment. And this, again, starts with trusting our educators, not silencing them or pushing them out, especially as it relates to their race or other identities. I think that their colleagues, especially those who come from traditionally majority groups, should listen, acknowledge, and take actions to remedy the problems rather than being defensive or relying on people of color to do the work. And so this starts with educating ourselves, but it also includes actively amplifying the voices of people of color and using our power and position and platform to speak up, and advocating for policy changes that would support recruitment and retention of a diverse staff.
Mr. Sands?
Would you kind of repeat the question? I kind of lost it with all these comments.
Yes.
I did lose it, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, of course. What is the role of a board member to create an inclusive school environment? And what is your plan for schools to recruiting more diverse staff so that our children see themselves represented in the faces of their teachers?
I don't see race as having an issue here. If a person is capable and qualified, who cares what race they are? Who cares what their background is? If they're capable and qualified and there's good, upstanding people, they have a good work ethic, hire them. Why not? You're not only benefiting the schools, you're benefiting the system, you're benefiting the students. Getting good, capable, qualified people who are qualified. In my former life, like I say, I worked for the Bureau. That's what we did. We looked for qualified people. I think we were colorblind. I didn't care. In fact, there was a young lady who I would have hired on the spot. She lived in downtown Baltimore in the projects. Beautiful woman. She's well-educated, well-demeanored, good, articulate. She was nice, and I wanted to pick her up right there on the spot. Guess I said too much, didn't I? Thank you.
Mr. Scanlon?
Well, the Board of Education must be the role model. It starts there. The political wrangling and the posturing, I think, is detrimental to our the cause of recruiting new teachers. Diversity, equity, and inclusion should be, it is part of staff development, and we need to continue that. And recruiting a diverse staff has always been a perennial issue. And as one school principal said to me just this week, he says, why would anybody want to come to Carroll County, watching what goes on here? And it just kind of struck me. It's like, is it really that bad? I mean, when you live here and it's part of your life, I guess it becomes the norm. But when the principal said that to me, it really made me think that we really have to do a better job of being, inclusive and being accepting of people.
Okay, thank you. And Mrs. Spear?
I already asked this.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. Have another minute.
I got one. Thank you. Okay, our next question has a title to it. It's entitled Multiple Pathways for Success, and this will be for Dr. Dorsey. I am a mother of 3 students who are or have been graduated from Carroll County Public Schools, one about to graduate with a 4.0 GPA. Many of her peers who were in AP, honors, GT dropped out once in-person classes resumed. They found a measure of independence and success with online learning that allowed them to thrive without the distractions of in-person schooling. Are there any plans to offer online classes to contrast the or to combat the dropout rates that have increased and offer flexibility to students?
Well, I know through the state, we're certainly looking at the virtual platform and making sure that that is available for students to learn. And again, the parent has shared, an interesting situation here because, again, we've talked about how some students were not suited for virtual learning, but I guess the flip side of that is that some students did quite well. Even for those students who may have felt bullied or, some students just seem to learn better when they can just sort of focus and be more independent. So we are going to be looking at a virtual platform that's going to be rolled out through the state, and that could be an opportunity that would be available for this parent and her student.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Jaworski.
So I'm not aware of any plans at the county level to pursue that, but I have advocated for a state virtual public school option. I'm also a huge proponent of the alternative school models. We have the community schools. Options to attend the community college, I think, are critically important because, as I've said before, all learners are different and they might need something different to get to where they need to go. And I think that it's really lovely that we have so many options within the county, and I think we should continue to expand those, and virtual public school is certainly one of those that we should pursue.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Sands?
I'm taking a virtual learning course right now to renew my flight instructor certificate. It is the most boring thing I've ever done in my life. It is terribly boring. I can't imagine somebody with a brilliant mind, a 15, 16, 12-year-old, sitting in front of a computer just reading all this stuff. It doesn't sink in. It takes a long time. It takes me twice as long to do a lesson as they say it's going to take. It's like some of the lessons like 3 hours long. It takes me 6 just to go back and read it again and again. You're going to subject a fertile mind to some of these things? No. I don't agree with it, except in extreme cases, like somebody can't get out of the home, they can't mobile, they're not mobile, they have no way to get the education, fine. But other than that, if the student is able and qualified to get to school, send them to school.
Thank you. Mr. Scanlon?
Thank you. At the beginning, I mentioned I had 4 sons go through Carroll County schools, and each one of those boys are as different as night and day from one another. You know, one of them just cruised through, level 4 stuff, didn't even, break a sweat. And one of my other boys didn't graduate. School was just not for him. But the virtual option would have been perfect because he's extremely smart. He just did it on his own and passed the GED without a problem. But school was just not working for him. So we do need some sort of virtual option, absolutely. And let's not, we were talking about multiple pathways. Let's not forget the Career Tech Center. I mean, that is an incredible program that we have. So many of my students went to the Career Tech Center for all sorts of things, everything from, trades to Cisco training and, all kinds of advanced classes as well. So it's very academic. And the ag classes. Oh my gosh, the ag classes are extremely academic.
Thank you. Mrs. Spirit?
Thank you. I think that there's no doubt that in-person instruction is what we envision for most of our students so that they can learn through relationships and through communicating with peers and beyond their academics through social emotional learning and other avenues. However, I think in order for us as a school system to keep up with the times, we have to offer flexible pathways for success for our students. I know the individual that asked the question shared about their gifted and talented student. I had a student that I was working with during the pandemic that was kind of the flip side. Likely would not have graduated had he remained in school. He was very heightened by many of the experiences with his peers and was dealing with a number of mental health issues that in-person learning was just a barrier for him. So I am a huge advocate for virtual learning as one of those flexible pathways, as well as the others that we've heard mentioned, like the Career and Tech program, dual enrollment. I think virtual learning offers our students an equitable solution for those that just learn better at home independently and via computer.
Thank you so much to all of the candidates for all of your responses. That was the last question from the participant section. We will now be moving on to closing statements, and you will be allowed 3 minutes for your closing statements. We will start with Dr. Jazowski.
Thank you once again, CCKE and NAACP, for this important conversation. I hope those who have participated or watched today have heard how valuable your voices are in this process. Education can be a vehicle for harm by perpetuating stereotypes and teaching systems that are unjust and inequitable. Or schools can be a place of healing, where relationships are built, worldviews are expanded, and students are prepared to enter the community as intelligent, thoughtful, compassionate citizens. I'm very concerned that the rhetoric of several of my opponents and fringe community groups, whether intentional or otherwise, is actively harming students and making the already difficult job of educators nearly impossible. Equating a symbol of hate, such as the Confederate flag, with a symbol of love and acceptance, treating the school system as a business to be run rather than a core public component of our democracy, alluding to guns as the best option for safety in the schools, suggesting that schools should be segregated because feelings have been hurt, asserting that gender nonconformity is a mental illness or a lifestyle choice. This is dangerous. it does not reflect the vast majority of community members' values and opinions in Carroll County. We need to flip the script, we need to flip the board, and we need to work together to get things done for our students and for a better school system for all. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Sands?
It is my belief anyone who attends a school board meeting must be heard, regardless of the issue, regardless of the time required, or what he or she has to say from any source. It is important if it is important to the citizen, should be important to the school board. The citizen should be shown proper respect. If I am elected, I will make myself available to any parent, teacher, or student at a school board meeting or elsewhere as a need should arise. Which is to say, if you go to a school board meeting and they won't let you speak, or the time runs out, I'll make myself available. It doesn't matter, and my phone number will be published. All conversations between us are private, and the identities will not be disclosed unless permission is given for me to disclose their identity. I believe everybody should have an equal opportunity to learn and to be heard. Everybody. It doesn't matter who they are, what they are, or who they are, or what their status in life is. It doesn't matter to me. What is important that everybody, to me, is a success and does the best they can with the tools available to them. I look forward to serving you as a school board member, and I ask for your vote. Thank you.
Mr. Scanlon?
Well, thanks for having us tonight. I hope I've made my positions clear, and I encourage voters to get in touch with me if you have any questions. So to summarize, we need to return our focus to our students and to education. Academics, absolutely, but there is more to school than that. School is a home to a hugely diverse group of students, and our challenge is to meet those kids where they are and to respect them for who they are. We need to attract and retain our educators with competitive salaries and a supportive work environment. Without our highly qualified educators, none of the rest can happen. And we need to remember that our schools are the hubs of our communities, where we come together to celebrate our common values. And to do all this, we need robust funding from the county and from the state. We have to work as partners with our county commissioners and with our state delegation in Annapolis. In my over 3 decades as a teacher here in Carroll County, I've learned many lessons, but 2 stand out to me. What the students remember years after they graduate is not the lesson that I taught, but it's the relationship we built. And if we lose sight of that, we have lost the battle. And secondly, I've seen trends come and go over the years, but the mission remains the same: educating our young people to prepare them for the real world. I promise not to be distracted by externals that don't really impact education. We do not have the luxury of years of on-the-job training for the next Board of Education. There is way too much to do. We need math specialists in our secondary schools. We're facing a shortage of special educators. Gifted and talented programs have been overlooked. We have gifted and talented teachers that are split between 4 schools. And putting all that aside, perhaps the biggest challenge we face is how to get our kids more excited about learning, how to foster inquisitive minds that want to learn, how to get them off of their devices in the latest TikTok trend to see the real world. And we worry about books when the real danger is online. If you look at these chat rooms and game rooms that kids get into, we should not be worrying about the books in our libraries. If a kid is reading, that's a good thing. So I truly believe in excellence and opportunity for all, and I thank you, and I ask for your vote.
Mrs. Spear?
I want to call attention to our students who organized tonight's event, along with the support of important groups such as the NAACP in our community. I'll spend my closing statement speaking to the important role of our students have in Carroll County Public Schools. Taking the time to listen to and give value to the student's voice is of primary importance to developing well-rounded, engaged citizens. I heard as a support against student voting power that as adults we have true lived experiences. I'd argue that our students bring a wealth of knowledge, reason, and their own set of unique lived experiences that we as adults cannot possibly understand until we ask, until we invite our students to the table and give their voice, until we acknowledge their experiences unique from former generations, and until we give power to our students as valued members of our system of education, we will continue to be distracted by manufactured problems. As a Board of Ed member, I will spend time advocating for our students and advocating for their voices to be heard. Putting an intentional focus to create clear and important pathways for student engagement will be important to me. I want to thank each of you for attending this evening and for your questions. I want to encourage you all to continue asking questions, to continue getting involved, and to never stop speaking up against the hate and discrimination currently happening in Carroll County Public Schools. Thank you.
And lastly, Dr. Dorsey.
Again, I give many thanks to the Carroll County Kids for Equity and the Carroll County chapter of the NAACP for sponsoring today's forum. And again, I've appreciated the interaction in the past I've had with the Carroll County Kids for Equity. Again, your voice is very, very important, and I continue to encourage you to use your voices and to use it in a number of venues to make sure that your points are being made to everyone. We again thank the Carroll Media Center, our timekeeper, and the audience for attending today's forum, and to those of you who have asked questions of us. And again, we thank the Carroll Arts Center for providing this venue. 4 years ago, as I ran for my first term on the Board of Education, I claimed that it was the people who made our system great, and I still wholeheartedly endorse that same belief today. Do we have issues? Yes, we do. Can we work together to try to solve the issues? I am willing to work and to continue to try to solve the issues that we do have. I would like to keep in mind, though, that as a board member, our main job is going to be governance, and governance means that we're going to be setting the policy for the system. So we need to make sure that at all levels, that's what we're looking at, the actual governance level, and we don't need to micromanage. We know that the superintendent and staff can take care of the administrative regulations and setting and making sure that the set policy is being followed. So I continue to still have the same values and beliefs and strategic plan that we have in place. I remain committed to those as we move forward, and I truly believe that when we come together and as we work on behalf of each student, not just the majority student, but each student, and we're not looking at one student group being favored over the other, but it's showing respect to each student group, I feel that we can certainly overcome our obstacles and work on achieving success for each student. So I would urge you to please vote for me to continue to serve on the Board of Education for our students, staff, families, and communities, and I would greatly appreciate your support. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dorsey, and thank you to all of the candidates for a most interesting and informative forum. We would also like to thank the audience and everyone that is watching at home, and also those who have submitted questions for the forum. This forum will also be available for viewing at the carrollmediacenter.org and YouTube. It will also be rebroadcasted on cable channels 19 and 1086. Before we go, I would like to encourage everyone to learn about the candidates running in the elections by visiting the CMC's online voters guide at carrollmediacenter.org, and of course to vote in this year's primary election. Thank you all for joining us, and have a good night.